Everyone has a story. I get them to tell it. Welcome to the Aron Bender Podcast, conversations with media personalities about their personal and professional lives and journeys. Really appreciate your support, whether you're listening on your favorite platform like Amazon Music or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or watching on YouTube, or nightly at 11 p.m. Pacific or 2 a.m. Eastern on DB&A TV at dbandatelevision.tv, or streaming with the DB&A TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV. Thank you so much. Before we get to my conversation with Chenue Her, a little about my story. I'm a widowed dad of two girls who just lost their mom, a grieving husband, a man in recovery trying to reconnect with the world with fresh eyes, faith, and perspective, a college journalism professor, a white guy in a world of injustice, a 20-year broadcast media veteran who had his dream job and then lost it. A year and a half ago, God gave me a gift, an opportunity to stop, step back, and breathe so I can learn about love, vulnerability, forgiveness, grace, self-care, patience, and understanding. Chenue Her is a TV news reporter at 11 Alive in Atlanta. We first talked for the podcast back in March, but that was a brief conversation centered mostly around the spa shootings in the Atlanta area and the Stop Asian Hate campaign. In this conversation, we dive into Chenue's fight with COVID, growing up in Minnesota, self-care as a journalist and son of Hmong immigrants, his meme fame, and his growing sneaker collection. But first, an update on the spa shootings case and how Chenue's been doing the last couple of months.
Yeah, so the latest this week, we found out from Fulton County as well as Cherokee County, because remember, there were two different sites of the shooting, so they were in different counties. And so this week, grand juries from both counties indicted him on several murder charges, and also the district attorney in Fulton County is seeking hate crime charges as well as the death penalty. So that's been sort of the big news this week. And just yesterday, I actually interviewed there was one survivor. He was shot in Cherokee County, and
the husband of one of the victims, right?
So he was there by himself. His wife was not there.
Oh, okay.
So he was actually shot as well, and but he survived. And so yesterday I interviewed him just to sort of get his thoughts on the latest. And yeah, so that's been the big news this week. So we'll see what comes next after this. But no, I've been good since. Just trying to stay on top of this, and just still trying to be mindful and keeping my eyes and my ears open to anything in the community that they may want to come forward and speak on. So
I feel like, and it's probably, has that been 6 weeks?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Okay, I feel like right after that, when we talked, there was not a lack of energy, because I don't feel like that's an accurate portrayal or representation, but it was just kind of a drained energy, kind of just like, oh.
Yeah, it was just it was somber, and I think for a lot of Asian Americans at that time, whether you were a journalist or a business owner or someone in politics or legislator, I mean, I think we just collectively had this sort of emotional exhaustion. And
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Stuff, right. So yeah, that was kind of how we all felt at that time.
You also have such a special connection with your hometown of St. Paul, Minneapolis, which was also in the news in the last few weeks with the Derek Chauvin trial, in the George Floyd murder. How did you take all of that in?
Yeah, I think for me, it really helped that I have a lot of friends that work in journalism there. And so I was able to really kind of take things in factually, and I think that really helps me because I'm in journalism, and so for me, when I can take things in factually like that, and because it was covered over a period of time, I think that really helped me kind of process everything. But yeah, I mean, when you see your hometown on national news like that, and you just kind of see everything that's been happening over the past year, it's a lot, because it wasn't just even the Derek Chauvin trial, but there were shootings that happened before then too. So it was just a lot.
And then I think Dante Wright was just,
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much down the street.
Yeah, it was just right in a suburb right outside Minneapolis. And so yeah, I mean, I commend my friends who work in journalism there, because it's just one thing after another. But also I feel for the people that live there, the people I know growing up who are still there. And so it's a lot to be in the spotlight all the time like that.
How do you separate your journalism hat from your I'm a person and I care about other people hat?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I try to, on my off time, I try to unplug a little bit. And I'm also really close with my family. So when I talk to my siblings or my parents or extended family, I try not to talk too much about anything that seems related.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps keep me grounded. But I think a part of it too is, I think the fact that I can still be a human being while being a journalist, I think it helps me kind of, when I'm doing stories, when I'm talking to people, I think it helps me relate to them a lot better than, just walking in and sort of shutting off my emotions.
Yeah, we've talked about this, I think you and I, and then with other guests on the podcast, the idea that we used to have to be robots, or at least we were expected to be robots.
Yeah.
And just go in, doesn't matter the story, just go in and cover it, tell me the facts, and leave your emotions at the door. And it's just not that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can still approach a story as a human being with emotions and still cover it very unbiasedly and factually. And honestly, a lot of that is behind the scenes. It's how you interact with people that you are going to be interviewing or talking to. A lot of that is more behind the scenes of that you don't see on TV or when you're reading a newspaper article. It's how you can be a human being and when you're talking to people, because a lot of times we talk to people when they are in like the most vulnerable state in their lives, or they're having the worst day of their life, and if you can't, as a journalist, be sympathetic or empathetic for them, it really makes the job hard.
Tell me about growing up in Minneapolis. You are the son of Hmong immigrants. First off, for our listeners who don't know about the Hmong community, just talk about it.
Yeah, so my ethnicity is Hmong. We don't have a country, but my parents are from Laos, and so a lot of Hmong people live in like Southeast Asia region. And so my parents, they immigrated over to the United States after the Vietnam War, and they actually met in the States and got married in the States. So. But yeah, we're
how did they meet? Did they both relocate to the Minneapolis area? Because I know there's a huge population in Fresno and a couple other spots in the U.S.
Yeah. So my dad's family relocated to Minnesota, which also has where I'm from, there's a huge Hmong population there. And then my mom's family relocated to California. So I'm sure through some, it's a small world when you're Hmong. So I'm sure that they met in Minnesota through, I'm sure, some sort of family affair, and yeah, that's how it all happened. So, so I still have lots of family in California and lots of family in Minnesota. So, but I haven't done a whole lot of traveling since the pandemic.
So, how are they doing through all of this? Because, again, I know we keep referencing the previous podcast, but not everybody listening to this did listen to the previous podcast. But you should. You should.
You should, yes. Definitely.
How have they been doing with A, the pandemic, and B, the increased number of hate crimes targeting Asian Americans and the Pacific Islander community?
Yeah, I think initially with the pandemic, I think I know like my parents and all the elders in my family, I think they were very scared, like a lot of people, because there weren't a lot of answers. And also at the time, the information that was coming out wasn't also translated very well. So there was lots of fear as to, what this was all about. And then on top of that, you're right. I mean, we start seeing the Asian American hate crimes rise. And so, like when my aunt recently called me and she was, making sure that I don't, go to the store at night and things like that. And, I think when it's your own family, like, living like that and sort of having these thoughts, I think it makes it a lot more real. And so, but my family, pretty much everyone in my family has since been vaccinated. And so I think with the pandemic, I think they're really starting to feel a lot more at ease about it. And also we have lots of Hmong doctors and stuff in the Twin Cities who've done really good, just like outreach and campaigns and getting everyone vaccinated. So I think that has been a big help for them. But I think right now they're a little bit more worried about just like the hate crimes and all that. So, my mom and my dad and my aunts are all very like, they get on me a lot about making sure I don't go places alone, especially late at night and things like that. So,
and we're recording this just a few hours after the CDC said, "Hey, by the way, if you're fully vaccinated, masks off, baby, let's go."
Yeah, let's go.
What was the? I want to go back to like. I'm probably going to take all this out. It's fine. I want to go back to because as you were talking, I'm thinking about also the idea that, immigrants into the U.S., they often come from countries where the government is not to be trusted, or if you do trust the government, it's kind of with a grain of salt. What was that transition like for them as you've had conversations with them? Growing up and whatnot, but also during the pandemic, the idea that, hey, the government says this, we should do that. And what was that? What were those conversations like?
I think I've always noticed that, like growing up, my parents were, they weren't super skeptical of the government or anything like that, because you're right. I mean, you keep in mind that they grew up and are from a country where, they weren't treated very well. So they get to the States and this is like better than anything they could have imagined. The technology's a lot better. Medicine's a lot better. And so they're not super skeptical of the government or doctors or anything like that. So they tend to, like when the CDC puts out new guidelines, they tend to really follow that very closely because, for most of their lives, I mean, they were never around, or for early on in their lives before the States, they were never around modern medicine or a government that really allowed them to be free. So for them, this is like amazing.
What kinds of conversations? I mean, you said you grew up in Minneapolis, a huge Hmong community. Again, Fresno, I think those two spots in the United States are like 75 or 80% of all the communities in the U.S. I would imagine you got a lot of what are you? Where are you from? Wait a minute. What is that? How did you deal with it or answer it? And I mean, I guess, I'll just leave it right there. Like, how did you answer it? How did you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm a big advocate for, I think, my community and making sure that we're visible in all spaces. And so education has always been sort of on the forefront of what I like to advocate for. So when people ask me, I have no problem, sort of letting them know who Hmong people are and what I am. When people come with the right intentions, I have no problem explaining who we are and where we're from.
Did you always want to be a journalist? Did you go to school? It was University of Northwestern St. Paul with journalism in mind?
Yeah. So I always wanted to be a journalist. Early on, I didn't know if I wanted to do newspaper or TV. And I kind of landed in the TV realm.
That was a good call. That was a good call.
Yeah. So I always wanted to go into journalism. And I mean, it's worked out, and I don't regret it. So,
what was that spark? Why did you always know?
Yeah, growing up in the Twin Cities, I watched a lot of like local news with my family, and it was mostly because we couldn't afford cable, so we watched like the TV would be on,
I
right?
was the same way.
Yeah, so we would watch the local news, and it's funny because my parents were like, they were such like fangirls of like the local news people, like. So wait, you live in LA, right?
Yes.
So do you remember Paul Majors? He anchored.
Oh, of course, Paul Majors. I'm Paul Majors.
Paul Majors, right? So growing up, he anchored in the Twin Cities.
Oh,
and
okay.
Growing up,
Yes.
my parents loved Paul Majors. Like they were always like, "Oh man, like he dresses so nice and he's so smart." And so I think for me, like that was always kind of my vision of like what having a successful career was like and what being smart was like. And so I think kind of early on, before I even knew like what journalism was, that was always my vision and my picture of what being successful was like.
I want to be Paul Majors.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
I want
to be Paul Majors. I want to be on the news. And so I think once I got old enough to kind of realize, oh, like this is what journalism is. There was no turning back.
Do you have an idea of maybe going back to the Twin Cities to report there? Is that your dream? Like growing up in LA, my dream was to go get experience somewhere else and come back to LA. What about you?
Yeah, that was always my goal early on. That was always my goal to, move around, get some experience, see different places, and then come back home and be around my family and being around a community that I grew up in. But now that I'm in Atlanta, we'll see. I mean, I really like Atlanta. I never really thought that my career would take me to a city as big as Atlanta. And so I'm enjoying it here. And, I've had this talk with my parents before because like they're always asking like, oh, when are you going to move back? Or do you want to move back? And, I've lived in the South for a while now and, I dread the snow and, so we'll see.
It's changed you. It's changed. You're spoiled now. You're spoiled with sunshine.
I know. My parents are always like, "Oh, do you want to come home for Christmas?" I'm like, "Nah, really."
Why don't they move down? Why do they move down to Atlanta?
Exactly. So, I mean, we'll see. The thing about this business is that things change all the time, and so I try not to always have like a set plan, just in case things change. But I'm like super happy where I'm at, and I love where I'm at, and so. We'll try to hold it down like that for a little bit.
Have you always been flexible in that department where it's like, okay, this was my dream when I first started, but now not so much? Have you always been flexible and just kind of being able to adapt?
Yeah, I think flexibility was something that I learned early on when I was still interning from just all my mentors that, I needed to be flexible and, not have things so set in stone. So I remember my first job was in Eugene, Oregon, and I had never wanted to move to Oregon, but I went to Oregon. And, at the time, I told myself, I was like, I would never live in the South. Like, I just don't want to live in the South. Yeah. And so I had all these states, all these other states. I'm like, these states I will never live in. Virginia and Georgia was on that list, and I've lived now in Virginia and Georgia. So
hold on. Why were those on the list? Like, it's just because it was in the South, and you're like,
I just didn't want to live in the South. Yeah.
And of course, that's where you go next.
Yeah. And so right after Oregon, I moved to Virginia, and then I was like, okay, well, it's not too bad. And then from Virginia, I came to Atlanta. So my own do not move to list has been broken twice.
What are some memories you have of that first market, Eugene, Oregon?
Man, it was, I think if you ask a lot of journalists, I think that first market is always one that they'll never forget. I mean, you're all so young. Most of us are not from there. So you almost really, you're around each other all the time. And some of my best friends to this day, whether they're in the business or not anymore, were people I met in Eugene, Oregon.
Same thing.
Right. It was just a great place to be. And I met great people there. And, I just remember, man, we would, you make very little money, but, you found ways to make it work. And having that in common was just, I think it really bonded you. And so, I keep in touch with all of my friends from there to this day.
It's where I developed my love for ramen. Like love.
Right.
I didn't eat enough of it that I learned to resent it.
You're right.
But that's where I developed. Like, what would you feel like if you had to nail down Oregon in like a food?
Oh, if I didn't, I've thought about this before. Probably like just plain oatmeal. Like that's what it is. Just plain oatmeal. Like that's really all, like
that's gonna
granola.
Get me through.
Yeah. That's all it is. ate so much ramen and oatmeal and cereal while I was there. But you know what, Dad? I remember those days. I still have pictures of my very first apartment in Oregon. It was so small, and I still have pictures of it in my phone. And every once in a while, I'll look at it and be like, man, like this is really where it started.
Any thoughts at any point during the process, during this journey of like, you know what? No, this is not for me. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I'm not going to be Paul Majors. I'm getting into real estate. I'm getting into PR. I'm getting into something where I can make some money.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had a couple of those moments along the way, and it wasn't ever because I felt like I didn't love journalism anymore. I think it was more so times where I felt like, man, you know, I just don't want to miss any more events with my family, or you know, it was more so things like that. It
the
wasn't
first years with those holidays, you work the holidays because you're the new guy, you're the single guy. You just
exactly,
yep.
You know, and because of that, you know, I've never felt like if I had a coworker who needed some time off because they have, you know, to be there for their kid, or if I had to work at Christmas because, you know, I don't mind because I don't have kids and I'm not married, so. And I know what it's like to miss family stuff, and I feel bad. So, you know, if I have to work at Christmas so that my coworker can go be with their kids, you know, that's not a big deal for me.
It's difficult to kind of imagine having that. It's difficult to imagine having the kind of time necessary at that first job for self-care. You know, it becomes, I feel like, more important as you go on in your career because, okay, your career is more established now.
Yeah.
You know, was that even in your mind back in Oregon, or it was like 18-hour days? I know I got to do it, got to pay the dues, because that was also the mindset that's kind of pounded into you in college.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in Oregon, we worked, even if it was just a regular 8-hour day, there was so much stuff crammed into that day that, you know, you get off and you just are exhausted. But you know, that's small market news life. You know, you're right. I mean, I think that was, I walked into it expecting that because I had really good mentors who kind of mentally prepared me for that. But I think at that time, you know, we were just just me and all of my friends, whether they worked at my station or the other stations, I mean, we just knew you just had to grind it out for your 2 or 3 years and you move on. And so that was kind of the mindset. You just grind and you move on. And so, you know, I look back on my 2.5, almost 3 years there, and you know, I think like, man, like I worked a lot. I worked a lot, you know.
Like Virginia and Atlanta combined in 3 years in Oregon.
Yeah, pretty much, you know. And it wasn't until a couple of years into me being in Virginia where I was like, man, like I need to like just slow down a little bit. Take some time for like self-care. It's okay to say no to people on the weekends. Just take time to yourself. I started seeing a therapist to kind of just really like, you know, hammer out some things that you know, I felt early on in my career. Because, you know, you see so much stuff, and at that time, because you were always so busy, you see so much stuff that you never talk about, and you just kind of cram it in there and you just move on. And so a couple of years into Virginia, I was like, man, you're like, let me just see a therapist and see what this is all about. And it's very helpful to just kind of help me unpack mentally. And that was when I really realized that, you know, I think self-care is really, really important, especially in this business. So
the idea of a therapist in the immigrant community, regardless of what community you're talking about, it's a foreign idea to just keep throwing out all these different. How did you come to the realization that you needed a therapist, and what kinds of conversations have you had with your family about like, hey, I'm seeing a therapist, and you're seeing a what? I'm sorry, you're sharing you're sharing your your family business or whatever with other people. What were those conversations like?
Yeah, you know, I think I was very fortunate in that my parents were understanding about what I was doing. And I think I think they asked questions more out of curiosity than being skeptical of what I was doing. And I think they did see too that once I started doing that, I was a lot mentally and emotionally healthier. So they were all for it. And then my siblings, I have 4 siblings, and they were all very supportive of it. And I actually encouraged them to, seek a therapist if they needed. But I was also but because of that, when I was looking for a therapist, I was very, very intentional about finding a therapist who was a person of color who kind of understood my family dynamics. And so I think that was really important. That was really helpful, because then she was able to kind of see kind of how my career and my social life really played with my family as well.
Wait, what social life? We're journalists. We're not supposed to have a social life. You're only talking about your second market. There's no such thing as a social life. Come on. At what point, or was there a single story or a single moment that said, okay, you know what, I really should talk to somebody?
I think for me, I didn't realize it then until 2 years later or so. About 2 years later, I didn't realize it, but I think it was the first mass shooting I covered in Oregon. It was at Umpqua Community College, and I think a total of like 10 people were killed, and I was out there covering that for days. And at that time, again, I mean, I was working in a small market, just trying to make slot alongside all these networks and all these huge stations. And, they had crews, and I was lucky to have one person with me. And so I think at that time I was just trying to make my deadline. And so I think after that, I didn't realize how much that kind of shaped the way I approached my job until I started seeing a therapist. And she was helping me unpack, and she was like, I think that might be why, you view things a certain way when you approach interviews, or when you approach stories, or how you view things. So I think that was the moment.
It's interesting that it still took a few years though for you to.
Yeah. I think I didn't fully grasp like the effect of covering that story for me. So yeah, it wasn't until I was able to have someone help me unload all that I realized, wow, like that really was a defining moment in my career.
There is such an emphasis on self-care and mental health. I teach journalism students at Cal State Northridge. And so I'm wondering, from somebody in the business who, okay, I've covered some really, really terrible stories, and I do see a therapist now. What is your advice to somebody like me who is talking with the next generation of journalists?
Yeah, I think they should just understand that it's not selfish and it's not weak to prioritize self-care. Because I think we live in a culture where if you take time for yourself, it seems kind of selfish, and I don't really see it that way now. I think if anything, it makes me a better journalist. I think it makes me a more enjoyable person to be around, even off the clock. And so for like younger journalists, just prioritize your self-care. And that doesn't necessarily mean seeing a therapist. That could mean just spending your Saturday reading a book and going to the park if that's what you enjoy. Just doing things that you enjoy, and not setting your schedule around someone else.
And the understanding that 5 minutes here and 15 minutes there is okay.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, if I'm having a long work day, and I have something to make slot, I'll just like, when I get to where I need to be, I just take 5 minutes to just sit there and not touch my computer, not look at my emails. I'll just take 5 minutes to just sit there and kind of breathe and kind of just, be in my thoughts for a little bit. And then I keep going. It's sometimes those little mental breaks for me makes a bigger difference than taking a 1 hour lunch break. So,
what about your days off? You give yourself like some no phone and computer time, some downtime, some true downtime?
Yeah. I think especially on my weekends, my biggest thumb rule is I don't keep my work phone in my bedroom. So that phone
Nice.
stays in the kitchen.
Nice.
It doesn't come into my bedroom.
Do the assignment editors know this? Do your bosses know this?
I feel like they know this, but I'm responsive. I mean, at the end of the day, we're journalists, and so I still will check my work phone. But at night, like when I go to bed, until I wake up, like the phone is not in my room, just so that it's not constantly buzzing or anything like that. And then I'll go to the gym, and then I'll just go take some time to myself and do what I need to do. But yeah, on my days off, I just really try to do those things that will re-energize me for Monday.
At what point did you pick up the sneaker obsession?
Oh, Lord. So this is the thing, is like, I grew up, like, I love Michael Jordan. Like, I grew up just a big basketball fan. And so for me, I think it really started when I was young and I would see Michael Jordan in these magazines.
The old magazines, because we know you're not even old enough to have watched him play live. I understand, Chenue.
Yeah,
I understand.
So it was really the old magazines.
Yeah.
Like, because for me, it started when I saw Space Jam. And I'm like, Michael Jordan's cool. So, then I started kind of like backtracking.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think really liking Jordan growing up, and then really just being into basketball at the NBA. I mean, I think that kind of is what sparked it. But at the time, like growing up, like, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't really get all like the latest sneakers and stuff. And so now I'm like, well, I'm an adult. I have no kids, no pets, no one else to be responsible for. So
Yes.
I'm like, so like I have some sneakers some retro Jordans that I bought that I remember as a kid, like really wanting them. And some of them have been re-released recently, and like I just had to have them, and so it's been kind of cool to like just be able to collect all that.
No, so I'm not a sneakerhead at all. So you could throw out all these kind of model names and everything like that. And I'd be like, oh yeah, no, that's cool. Okay. But I'm going to tag this in such a way that somebody's going to find this. Okay. Somebody's going to find this clip, and they're going to know exactly what you're talking about when I ask you, like, what are a few of your favorites in your collection, and what are some of like your white whales that you just haven't gotten yet, but you're trying?
Okay, so I would say right now, I have mostly Jordans, like retro Jordans, but I would say my most like prized possession, and I haven't even worn them, and I looked for them for years, and I finally found them when I moved to Atlanta, is a pair of classic Reebok pumps, the Michael Chang pumps, because Michael Chang,
Wow, nice.
Yeah, they're like
that
amazing.
That is a throwback, man.
It's a total throwback. Because I would say, like, I think for me, like the earliest Asian American pro athlete that I can remember that was really prolific in American sports is Michael Chang. And so I really, really wanted these classic Reebok pumps. And so for years, I would say probably 5 or 6 years, I looked for them and I could not find them, like in good condition anyways. And so I moved to Atlanta, and my cousin who lives in Portland was like, hey, have you been to the store in Atlanta? He was like, I think they have those pumps. And he sent me a link, and I found them. They had one pair left my size, and I bought them.
Oh, in your size too? Like
in my size too.
Now, would you have bought them if they were not in your size, but they were in good condition, because you're like, I've just got to have them?
Yeah, they were brand new. Yeah, even if they weren't my size. Brand new, never been worn.
Dude.
So, and the box is all beat up, but the shoes are brand new. And so, yeah, no, I would have bought them even if they weren't my size, because my ultimate goal with that pair of shoes is I really don't want to wear them. I want to see if I can eventually have Michael Chang sign them, but then I just want to like put them away.
Yes, yeah, on the wall behind you, some sort of glass case or something.
Yeah,
yes.
I want to just put them away.
What's the likelihood that you can get him signed? I don't even know like what he's doing now.
I think he lives in California, and I think he just does a lot of like nonprofit work now. Through tennis and other sports.
Send them to me. I'll just stalk him for like a week. Be like,
that would be amazing to just get these signed right now. I love them. So I've never worn them, but I think I don't have them, but I just want a pair of like the classic Chicago Jordan 1s, the red, black, and white. In my opinion, I think that is the most iconic sneaker of all time. I don't have a pair. It's a lot.
Why not though? Like what has stopped you? Is it the price? Is it the availability?
It's definitely it's definitely the price. I mean, you can't find them for retail, so
Right.
I would have to buy them in the resale market, and it's just a little out of my price range right now. So someday I think I might just like buck up and get them, but I would say that right now, for me at least, that's like a grail that I want.
For safety purposes, we're just going to claim that all of your sneakers are safe off-site in some kind of security behind armed
somewhere
guards.
in Atlanta.
What's the most you've spent for a pair of sneakers?
The most I've spent to date, is probably a little over 500.
Oh, that's not bad. I've heard.
Yeah,
okay, that's not bad. Yeah. I was expecting when you started saying 5, I'm like $5,000.
No. I'm not quite there yet. Yeah, no, just a little over 500. You know, I still try to keep it modest because you know I still have other financial responsibilities.
Yes, exactly. You may not have like little financial responsibilities running around, but you still need a roof over your head. And you still need to pay for all the armed guards and security around the shoes that you already own.
Exactly.
Yeah. One thing we didn't. Oh, go ahead.
But I was going to say, you know, I have a lot of Jordans, but I think the pair that I wear the most is probably just a regular pair of New Balances. They're just, you can't beat them.
Did you really just drop a New Balance while we talked about sneakers?
I did. Just a regular pair of dad shoes, New Balances. Those are my.
I'm just going to cut this out because you might have just lost like 80 followers on Instagram when they hear this. Like, yes, he's got all these shoes. By the way, I rock New Balance. That's okay though. It's okay. You're looking down like, hey, they're comfy, man. They're comfy. Yeah. The one thing we didn't talk about last time that I was kicking myself for is you not only had COVID, you were knocked down for the count.
It was rough, man. It was rough. Yeah, I got it last June. And I remember I wasn't feeling well one day. I had like just like a really bad headache and I was really tired. And so I called out sick from work and I just could not go to work. And so it kind of freaked me out because at that point I had been doing so many COVID stories. And so I knew all the symptoms and so it kind of freaked me out. And so I just did like a double check on like the CDC website. I'm like, I think I might have it.
Checking all the boxes.
Yeah. I was like, I definitely have it, I think. So I went and got a test that day. It was going to take a couple days for the results to come back in. And so a couple days go by and the results hadn't come back in yet, but I was so sick. I actually FaceTimed my sister, and like before I could even say anything, she was like, "Are you sick?" I was like, "I don't feel good at all." She was like, "Dude, I think you need to go to the ER. You don't look good." So I did, and when I got to the ER, at that time, I mean, it was so strict at the hospital here. Yes. I pulled up, and the check-in station is outside, and so they took my temp, they checked my oxygen, and the woman checking me in, like she looked at my numbers and she was like, "Don't go in the waiting room." And she picked up a walkie and she was like, we have a patient that just walked in. We need to get him in the back right away. And so they just like walked me back there and threw me on the bed and like put fluids in me. And they did a COVID test right away. And I was in the ER for probably 6 or 7 hours, just knocked out. And sure enough, I had COVID. And so I was home for 14 days, just like
so from the ER, fluids, all kinds of things, and then sent home?
Yeah, so they did all that, and then they told me, you know, you could stay if you feel like you need to, but 6 or 7 hours in, I felt a little bit better because they had me on fluid, and I also had pneumonia too because of the COVID.
Oh, hey, by the way.
Yeah, so they were like, yeah, so you have COVID and whatever. Oh, and by the way, these are the X-rays of your lungs. You have pneumonia, so make sure you take this medication. It was rough. And so the doctor, was checking in on me and he was like, we can release you if you want, but you can stay. And at that time I felt good enough to leave. And so I came home and then I was just in bed for 14 days and that was that.
Did you tell your sister first because she was the one you had talked with, or did you call your parents? What were those talks like?
Yeah, so I texted my siblings in a group chat. I'm pretty sure. I said, "Hey, I have COVID," and so at first I think they didn't believe me. Like
I was thinking the same thing.
The three younger siblings, I think at first they didn't believe me. It was my older sister who I initially talked to, so she had already physically seen that I didn't look good.
Yeah.
And so she was like more worried, but my three younger siblings thought I was kidding. And so I was like, no, I like legitimately have COVID. Like I'm bedridden. And I was like really sick for about a good week and a half. And my work was great. I mean, like my managers checked in on me, like they would call me and check in on me, and my coworkers were constantly asking like if I needed them to drop anything off at my door. And so, I made it through, but it was definitely scary because I think at that point I've been covering so many COVID stories, and I'd heard how serious it could be for some people. And, at that time there was this belief that, oh, young people will be okay. And I mean, at the time I was 29, no medical conditions. I've never been that sick in my entire life. And it really knocked me out.
You mentioned you're not the oldest, but you are the oldest male. What kinds of pressures do you feel as the oldest male of 5 kids?
I think I have an older sister, and I think she's always really set the bar really high because she's like crazy smart. And she's like crazy smart and like really responsible.
So forget the pressure of oldest male. You've got the pressure of living up to older sister.
Yeah, right. And so I'm the oldest boy in my family. I'm also the oldest boy, like
all the cousins,
of all the cousins, and everything,
right.
So I had a lot of pressure from my grandparents and all that to like really set the bar for everyone. But I'm like, she already set the bar. Like I can't do that.
Right.
She was like a straight A student, very studious, and I was like, like an average student and not super studious. And so, I think in a sense, like I was really lucky to have a sister that was like so like near perfect. And so, I think there was I think the biggest pressure for me was, can you meet that? That was it for me.
Yeah, forget the parents. It's like I've just got to meet this bar as best I can. But of course, as most of the guests on this podcast will attest, journalism full of average students, baby.
You're right. Like
that's how we do.
It's funny. Like so when I was in high school, I took a journalism class, and I was like not into it like at all.
Same.
Like,
oh my gosh.
I probably got like a C or something in that class. And it's funny because I still kind of keep in touch with that teacher to this day. and every once in a while I'll be like, man, I'm like surprised that I've like made it this far in the business, and like I feel like I wasn't that good of a student, and she was like, it was always there, like you just needed to find it.
I think a lot of times that's how it is with journalism majors and people who want to pursue this, is there's like some sort of creativity that they can't quite tap into or put their finger on. I mean, there are some who absolutely like, yes, I love storytelling, let's go. But others, including myself, like I just didn't quite know about this avenue, or that this was the type of creative muscle I want to flex.
Right. I was a horrible student when it came to like math and science and like things that I wasn't really interested in. And once I got into journalism and I was doing it, and I felt like, man, like I can really make something of myself doing this. That's when I really tapped in. I was like, okay, like this is it, and so that was really when I realized like I could make a career out of this, and I really took it seriously.
It took me 3 years at a community college to just kind of figure out like, oh, okay, I don't want to go into business. I'm not very good at accounting. And then sat there with my mom and the kitchen counter, college catalog, schedule of classes, what would be fun, what would be interesting. And I picked radio, and I fell in love. And it was from that, it was 4 years. It was 2 at community college, 2 at Cal State Northridge. it's the other three where I've just tried to figure out, like, okay, what can I do? What is interesting? What would be what could I be passionate about? And it just, no boxes were being checked.
Yeah, I think once you tap into that, once you kind of tap in and like sort of like unopen, you open this box of like, finding like where your passions lie. I think that really motivates you to really, just basically go all in this. And right, like I wasn't the best student. I got by, but once it came to journalism, it was like, I mean, that was my thing, you know. And
you're like, oh, I totally want to do this assignment.
When I was my station in Virginia, this is funny because like there's the military reporter there. He's someone that I really, really look up to in this business. He's been in the business for a long time.
Yeah, shout him out. What's his?
Mike Gooding at WVEC in Norfolk, Virginia, the military reporter, one of the best reporters I've ever worked alongside. It was funny because he was telling me one time it was almost in like a bragging manner, and I appreciated it so much because he's like a Virginia broadcasting like legend, and he was like, I went to Old Dominion, and he was like, I graduated there with the lowest possible GPA you could have to graduate to this day. And he like when he talked about that, and I was just like mind blown because I was like, Mike is one of the smartest people I've ever met in this business. I mean, this dude is brilliant, and I think that for me, like as a young journalist at that time, I think that for me really was like, it was really like an eye opener because there were times where like around that time of my career, there were times where I felt like I wasn't as smart as everyone because I had coworkers who had like master's degrees and some coworkers who went to very prestigious J schools. And so there were times where I'd be like, oh, I'm not as smart as, so-and-so.
Yeah. You get this imposter syndrome. Like I'm here, but I don't belong.
Yeah. Cause and so I remember when Mike told me that I was like, no way. Like you're like the smartest dude like I've met in this business, And that really was a bright spot just in my career, having a veteran like that really be so candid about that.
This may be old school on my part, and I'm just throwing that out there. Do you ever have any suggestions to change your first name?
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely come up, and I have a hard firm no. Like it's if
yes.
if a station or if a manager feels like me needing to change my name was something that needs to happen for me to get a job, and I think
that's not necessarily somebody you want to work for, right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. I think it's just best that we don't pursue that.
I mean, it's a little easier now. I mean, you're 3 markets in. So it's like, hey, it's been fine for these 3 markets, but I would imagine going into your first market or even at University of Northwestern St. Paul, the idea like, hey, Chenue, let's maybe consider some sort of name change. Yeah,
I think early on in my career, I would have been okay with it because I just wanted a job, and so
if somebody says, hey, let's call you Steve.
Right? Right. I was like, whatever it takes. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. But I think now, like you said, I mean, I've been in the business for a while now and I'm 3 markets in, and I don't think I would do it now. And, I think I am very lucky that like I'm a part of AAJA and they've been very, very good about supporting AAPI journalists in things like this. And so, I think now like I just wouldn't do that because when I like, say, for example, if I ever move back home or if I'm in a market where there's a lot of Hmong people, they see my name and they automatically know that I'm Hmong, I mean, that happened when I moved to Atlanta. I was on air for maybe a week and people started DMing me. They're like, oh my God, you're Hmong and you're in Atlanta. And yeah, it was great.
Yeah, just the idea like, okay, maybe you change your first name, maybe. Yeah. But definitely not your last name, because that is your heritage. That is you. I mean, there are only like a dozen last names in the Hmong community.
Yeah. There's 14.
14. Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's like people see her. It's like, okay, that's my guy.
Yeah. 14 or 18. It's like 14 or 18.
All right, I'll have to Google it right now. Hold on.
I'm pretty sure
I'm just gonna go Hmong last names. Let's see. Of course, there is 18.
18, yeah, the 18 clans or council, the 18 council.
Okay, now here's the thing, though. I just Googled, Hmong last names, Hmong surnames. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, if I Google your name, and in doing research prior to this, okay, you Google Chenue Her, and then the first autocorrect suggestion or the first autofill suggestion is meme.
Oh, gosh.
Seriously. Seriously.
I'm never going to live that down. I'm never going to live that down.
Which is what you tweeted, like, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that, or whatever it was, like a year later, and it's still here.
It's so funny because, like, at least once a year, that tweet will just take off. Like, I will get notifications for a week that people are liking it, retweeting it. It's crazy. And it was funny because when I first tweeted that, it took off and it was getting retweeted a lot and shared and liked. And then it kind of died down after like a week. And then Chad Ochocinco retweeted it. And that's when it blew up and it became a meme. And
so it was, if you spot this guy, call police. U.S. Marshals are looking for him, and he may have been in Hampton Roads. Now, here's the thing. The original tweet is not the picture that usually gets associated with it. And that's the part that gets changed most often, right?
Yeah,
is the picture.
So the original tweet was that, and then it had a link to our web story, and then it was the guy's like crazy mugshot.
Oh, super tattooed. It's like every SoundCloud rapper combined into one.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that was the original tweet, right? And then and then somewhere along the line, like someone photoshopped another picture over it. And so it was funny because like there's like random people that I went to like middle school with who will like message me on Facebook and be like, hey, you're a meme. It's so funny.
Now, if somebody, I will include a screenshot of this for DB&A TV and YouTube. So if you're listening to this, then go find the video of this, or I'll probably just link that original tweet or whatever in the show notes for the podcast, because that's the last thing that I expected to find when Googling you, to find like, okay, let's see where he worked first and let's do this. I will admit I was nervous. I was genuinely nervous clicking on Chenue Her meme because I had no idea what was going to come up. No clue.
It's, at first I was like, I think that was really like the first tweet I had that like really like blew up. And, I blame Chad Ochocinco because it died down and he retweeted it and it just blew up.
The one I saw was from Dana White. He
retweeted it too.
Yes.
Yeah. A couple like famous people retweeted it, and it really just took off from there. And so every once in a while, like, it'll get revived and people will find it. So
I'll have to Photoshop my picture in there, and then maybe that'll go viral, and maybe people will find the podcast. Why not? We'll throw it out there.
Do it.
You and I have connected via DM in the last few weeks over you're going to some vegan restaurants in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Now, are you vegan? Do you try to like, okay, meatless Mondays or this or that?
No, so I'm not vegan, but one of my very good friends and mentor, shout out Joy Lim-Nakran. She's an anchor at Court TV. She just moved to Atlanta, and she's vegan. And so when she moved here, we're gonna go catch up and have dinner together. And so she's vegan, and so she found a restaurant and we went. I'm not like vegan food is nasty or anything like that, but I was cool with it, and so we went and had a good time. I don't have any dietary restrictions or anything like that. I just try to be a little cautious about what I eat. So
MOKKA Vegan in Atlanta, that's where I think you went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was a Malaysian vegan restaurant. And I've been to Slutty Vegan in Atlanta, and it was like that. It feels like eating it doesn't feel like eating vegan food, whatever.
If you walk into a good place like that serves, quote, vegan junk food, if you didn't know it was vegan, then you would not be able to tell the difference. That's how far it's come. If this was 2005 or 10, you're not getting that. maybe one or two places here and there who have found, the secret, but by and large, you're not getting that.
Yeah. That's what my friend was telling me. She was saying that, her being vegan in 2021 is so easy because even if she's on the road, she was like, basically any chain or grocery store or anywhere you stop will have some sort of vegan option. And so,
and it's interesting because, you go to the South, you say vegan, it's like it's a foreign language. I know you're in a major city in Atlanta, so it's a little bit easier because you've got, so it's a melting pot, if you will. But it's so much easier now, just in general. But like when I've been vegan since 2017, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we decided, okay, we need to change something. We need to try to control something in this life that feels out of control.
Right.
And we felt blessed because we're in Los Angeles. It's so much easier to get things. If you're in Wyoming or Montana, good luck.
Yeah. It's I think my friend was saying that, a lot of, we may not realize it, but like a lot of, especially the processed meats that we eat, like a lot of it isn't even fully meat. So, you can really easily like mimic that, in a vegan fashion. I mean, if you want a full-blown steak, that's going to be hard to mimic, but just like the sausages and the hot dogs and things like that.
Yeah,
really
I draw the line at like tofu steaks. Let's not get carried away. The tofu steaks. Right. I understand that that's a portobello mushroom. I get it. It doesn't taste anything like the steak that I used to enjoy.
Not at
Just
all.
Stop it.
Did you feel any sort of health benefits after you switched over?
I lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just that's how I start telling people, like, because we stopped with the junk food, we stopped with the processed stuff, a lot of the processed stuff. Now, here's the thing with going vegan, you can still go heavy on the processed because, like you said, if it's mimicking meat, it's likely going through some sort of or heavy processing. But more energy. I was down under 200 pounds for the first time in several years, dad bod and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But 20 pounds in the first 3 weeks, and then anxiety and stress helped me with the other 20 pounds after that. But, and now if, we're recording this on Thursday, May 13th, this is going to get posted soon. So, I'm on a raw vegan diet just for this week. Maybe next week, because I want to reset. I was still going too heavy on the processed stuff. I just felt heavy. I just felt just kind of drained. So anytime you can change your diet, whether it's vegan or something else, but anytime you can change your diet for a week or 14 days, you're going to feel a difference. You're totally going to feel a difference.
Yeah. It's last March when really everything, when the world shut down, I was so scared. I was like, oh man, like I don't want to be, because I can't go to the gym. I can't do anything. Yeah. I don't want to put on a bunch of weight, sitting in the house and working from home. And so I was like, just like your thought process, I was like, the one thing I can really control right now is my diet. So I need to like do something different. And, I'm not vegan. But
ramen and oatmeal, baby. Ramen and oatmeal. Let's go back to basics.
That's right. I was like, oh man, like what do I do? Okay, so I thought I could still go and walk outside. I can go walk in the Beltline and get my exercise in that way. But then I switched to a pretty strict keto diet for about 3.5 months, and within the first month, I dropped quite a bit of weight.
Yeah.
Between exercising and changing my diet, it was crazy.
Chenue, thank you for this. I appreciate it. Like I said, my first repeat customer on the podcast. I could not have picked a better guest to have come back for their second time. Thank you, Chenue. I appreciate
it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Aron Bender Podcast, whether it's on YouTube or nightly at 11 p.m. Pacific or 2 a.m. Eastern on DB&A TV at dbanatelevision.tv or streaming with the DB&A TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV. You can find me at aronbender.com. If you have guest ideas or comments, email me aronbendermedia@gmail.com. Be well, and thanks for watching.